Hi, I'm Don Stanek, your instructor for Certified Sales Interrogator. Now that we've covered the buyer experience and a good portion of the buyer interview to get the story of your buyer with these different story points and topics within the story, experience, urgency, ability, status, requirements, and motivation, this chapter is all about some practical additional dialogue that we might want to participate in and study and take some good notes. Fundamentally, education and communication are the two things we do as sales professionals, particularly if you don't want to position yourself as a salesperson. So you're an educator and you're bringing value. In order to have education, you have to have good interactive conversation. And if you don't take some time and think through your questions before you get into an environment, you're going to find yourself struggling for what to say. It might not be relevant, and it might just not be that efficient. This chapter is all about walking through a couple of additional scenarios. I think that our core interrogation skill set is really around that buyer. And then after we learn that, then how do we start applying some of these additional techniques to sellers, team members, or even agents that we're trying to recruit? Let's get started. The seller interview is an essential part of your toolbox in order for you to be able to get more listings. And at the core of the seller interview is a simple question, and that is, why is this person wanting or needing to sell? Now, as you go through the seller interview, in 9 times out of 10, you might be helping this individual locate a replacement property. And this is why we went through the buyer interview before we went through the seller interview. As you're going through your listing presentation or your pre-listing presentation, you need to structure it in such a manner as to be able to interview this seller to determine their core needs and wants and understand why their current property isn't meeting those needs and those wants and those expectations. At the end of the day, there's 2 things you need to resolve with the seller. Why is it you're selling, and what do you plan to do with the proceeds of the sale of the property? And here's why that's important. Because in a perfect world, if money were no object, right, why wouldn't you keep the property and just turn it into an investment vehicle for yourself? Well, because I need the money, and I need the money for this reason. As I mentioned, maybe that money is going to be utilized to acquire a replacement property, but don't always just assume that's the case. Many times when sellers are selling, they think they're going to net so much proceed out of the sale of their house that they're going to be able to not only buy a bigger home, but they're going to have all this extra money left over to satisfy that additional thing. Like, wouldn't it be nice if we went on vacation this year? You know, we've been thinking about replacing the car. Many times I've sold homes to people and they walk into a brand new home and a month later, they've got a brand new vehicle in the front yard. What? It seems a little excessive. But this is what happens in the mind of people. And so you have to resolve, why are they selling and what are they going to do with the proceeds of that sale? Why do you need the money, right? So how do we get there? Well, you could just come out and say, hey, why are you selling and what are you going to do with the money? And that's fine. I think you need to probably smooth that out with 10 or 15 other questions to really, really dial in on it. It's important for you to be able to set a good expectation on the proceeds of what's going to happen with that sale, because it might not satisfy their terminal goal. And if it doesn't satisfy their goal, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult spot as a listing agent. You might be sitting on a property that's overpriced and it's not getting showings because it doesn't show well for financial reasons. Maybe you got great photography, but it's just priced a little bit out of market and traffic is not looking at it. If you don't understand the core motivation for this seller and what they're trying to achieve, there's a much higher likelihood that you're not only going to take an overpriced listing, but when it comes time for you to start negotiating back and forth a little bit on price, you really don't necessarily have a leg to stand on. Would the sale of the property satisfy their need and their want? And most importantly, did you ask them and did you really, really drill down into that intent? I coach hundreds of agents who are just really excited to get a listing. And sometimes they make compromises and they price it in a place in the market that's not necessarily realistic. I don't want you to be that agent. I want you to have clarity on why this person is selling their home and what is their intention with the proceeds of the money. If you get to that financial question, it's going to give you the key to their real core motivation and it's going to help you price the home correctly, and it's going to help you get more sales quickly and help more sellers, quite honestly. A very valuable place where you need to ask better questions is in handling objections and in dispute resolution. Usually, if two parties are at odds with one another, it's because at some point there was a breakdown in communication. Now, sometimes it's performance, and maybe that performance is not there, and it's because no one set a correct expectation. That expectation was part of a presentation. But did the sales professional take the time and the effort necessary to go searching and probing a little bit deeper around this issue? Misunderstanding, well, we closed, we moved in, and the washer and dryer was not included. It's not there. And man, am I upset because I thought I heard him say it was going to be there. Now, it might not be documented any place in the paperwork, but as a sales professional, it's incumbent upon you to take responsibility for the communication. When people are listing their home or buying a home, there's all sorts of information being thrown at them, and thrown at them. And a lot of times if someone sees something with their eyes, it's done, it's part of the contract. Well, we know that's not the case. Take some time and let's talk about dispute resolution in terms of asking questions. Probe deeper. This is about follow-up questions and then having a conclusion statement. So, Bill, as we walked through this home, you realize that there are some things that are included and some things that are not included in this property. For example, all that stuff that's nailed to the wall, and the fountain in the front yard, and the washer and dryer are not staying, they're going with. Now, sometimes Bill is just kind of walking around the house and the salesperson's talking, and the salesperson listed 3 things that weren't going to come along in the sale, and they just kind of glossed it over. Now, here's the issue. The issue is, whose fault is the communication error? Well, I'd tell you it's probably the salesperson's fault, because they should have taken in each item and asked, do you have any questions about that, right? So what happens is when you put a period at the end of that statement with a follow-up question, Bill, the fact is not everything's included in the sale, and the washer and dryer is not included. Do you have any other questions about that? Do you have any more questions about what's included and not included? So what's going to happen at that point is a couple of things. You're going to establish clarity because you brought this person back into the moment because you kind of found them drifting and not really listening to you. Asking the question is going to kind of jolt this person back into reality, because when you ask a question, they have to respond, right? It almost forces interaction. And so in disputes where there's miscommunication, it's almost always because the salesperson's in presentation mode and they haven't gone back to qualify intent. Now, another technique with questions and interrogation around dispute resolution is being able to measure the weight and the impact of this thing that's happened. And so we're doing this because we need to make a statement and ask a question and then find a go-forward protocol. And this is kind of handling objections 101. But at the core, the first thing is you have to understand, oh my gosh, was there some confusion? I thought this and they thought that, and those two things did not meet in the center. So now, oh my gosh. And so it's very easy to not stay logical and stay grounded in asking questions. It's very easy to kind of go off into, well, he said this and he said that and he said that, and then the emotions take over and you're off to the races. As a sales professional, take some time to start walking yourself through common scenarios. How frequently are buyers and sellers confused about what's included? All the time. How frequently are we confused about what comes back in a home inspection and what we're going to do about it? You're setting presentation and precedent up with asking questions. Jim, I know you've purchased a home before, and when you did that, was there home inspection? Oh, there was. Okay. And tell me a little bit about the home inspection that you got the last time you were in this situation. Well, it was 75 pages, and it said that the doorknob was broken, and this and that, and this and that, and this and that. And what am I doing? I'm trying to measure this person's, what is the impact of that home inspection going to be in the future? Now, I don't know what the individual items are, but I need to start asking some questions and laying a groundwork for the fact that It's a document. It might be subjective, and the things that are in that document may or may not get completed. I might go ahead and close this objection topic with an if-then statement, right? So I might say, Bill, if the inspection report comes back and everything is acceptable to you, or it's just cosmetic type items, do you think it'll be a factor, or do you think you'll still want to go forward with the purchase, right? And so Bill might say, well, yeah, depending on what's in the report. And so I might probe a little deeper, and I might ask him, well, what are the sort of things that might be in a report that would cause you to just not go forward or stop? Now, am I trying to sabotage myself? No, far from it. I know the inspection report's going to come back. I know that there's going to be information in there that's going to be subjective and possibly confusing between two parties. I am using some basic interrogation skills to start probing this person's weighty response for a future objection. Trying to condition, hey, the report's going to come back, we're going to come through it, and then we're going to move on, right? Oh, okay. So when we start addressing individual items in that inspection report, I might use different type of interrogation strategy called an if-then statement or measurability. Jim, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being I don't want the property any longer, and 1 being it's like no big deal at all, I don't even notice it. Had you not told me, I wouldn't even noticed it. Like between 1 and 10, is this thing that we're talking about here, is this, like, where does that fall in your mind? Well, I know I'm going to have to spend extra money for the washer and dryer, but I kind of expected it, so, it's a 2, right? Oh, okay, great. So it's not, either way, it's not that big of a deal then, right? Yeah, okay, great. So let's do this. I'll write it in the offer and see if we can, in fact, get the washer and dryer. But then, for gosh sakes, as an agent, you better communicate really clearly what gets accepted on either side. But what you've done, which is essential, is using some additional interrogation and some additional discovery, you're trying to, what is the impact? What is the future impact of this issue? So handling objections, you can use a very similar type of technique, maybe on a scale from 1 to 10. Jim, with the 3 homes that we've seen today, so the first house that we saw, 1 to 10, is it a contender? Do you like it enough to write an offer on it or not? Now, that's a question, right? It's a closing question. And Jim says, there were things about the house I really liked, but I don't think it's not for me. So maybe we do it with the second home, and maybe we do it with the third home. And we kind of get to a point where I got a theme now, and the theme is none of the homes are good enough no matter what I show them. So now I have to go back and think to myself during discovery, during my initial interrogation, when somebody was giving me the facts around the requirements and their core need and all these other things, I have to go back and start re-quantifying that. Now, even though I did a really good job during the buyer interview, now the rubber's hitting the road because we have moved from the theoretical discussion of, yes, let's go buy the house or look for the right house. Now we're standing in the house, and now we step from theory to practice. This is the actuality. This is the situation. Is this the home? Is this the home that you would like to buy? Look at that. It's a closing question. Is this the home you'd like to buy? And does that sound pushy when I say that? No, because every time I show somebody a property, I ask the same question. And if they say yes, I'm writing out paperwork. If they say no, I'm not going to gloss over it. What is it specifically about this home that prevents you from going forward? Well, this, that, this. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to show you any more properties based on your concern, because I want to make sure that I'm really listening to what your needs and your wants are. Now, I might have to take some additional presentation steps, and I might have to give them a little dose of reality. I might have to say, Jim, with everything we've talked about in terms of your time frame and your budget, these 2 items that you really don't like that are just non-negotiable for you, this is every property that's in the market right now in your price range. So let's take a step back and let me ask you, like, how important is your time frame? We could wait for another house, but I don't know if that house is going to show up in your price range. Many times homes are more expensive, more difficult to acquire in the future for all kinds of reasons. Jim, on a scale from 1 to 10, if you had to make this small compromise on this item, would you still go forward with the purchase? As a sales professional, it's about drilling deeper into interrogation and discovery. Being able to handle that dispute resolution and find conflict resolution, or being able to handle that objection based on additional discovery and additional probing, is what's going to separate an average sales professional from a really successful, amazing sales professional. The last thing we want to talk about in this chapter is asking questions and interrogation in order to prepare for presentation. If you're giving information or presenting facts or information to your customer and it's not in alignment with their needs, their wants, and their interests, you're going to lose them. They're not going to be able to hear what you have to say because you're not adding value. You're not adding value to their experience. Now, some of the things you have to talk about maybe are a little dry, and it's things that this customer should know about, right? They probably should know about that, but where's the sizzle? In order for you to identify the sizzle, you have to ask questions about where are you spending the vast majority of your time when you are home. In the evening, when you're relaxing, walk me through that. Are you watching TV? Are you reading a book in a quiet area? Help me understand a little bit about the place in your home that you have now that kind of brings you the most joy. And then, follow up with another question. And so why is that, right? So I'm developing all these deposits. I'm getting all these deposits of information so that when I'm presenting, I'm showing a property, what am I doing? I'm going to go ahead and match up this person's need or their want that I discovered through asking a question. I'm going to match that up with a presentation point, Jim, remember when we first met, I asked you all those questions about your home that you have right now and how do you currently live in it? And you were gracious enough to share a story with me about the backyard and how you had great memories growing up as a kid. Your whole family was in the backyard. Your dad was barbecuing, and how much you really wanted to be able to take that experience and replicate it for your family now and your kids and your wife. And so let me ask you, when we stand here in this backyard of the property A that we're looking at now, is this backyard, can you recreate that memory here in this backyard? Or is it too small, or what is it about this backyard that may or may not be, working for you? At which point he says, no, my gosh, you know what? Thanks for reminding me, because this is exactly like the backyard we had growing up as a kid. I love it. In fact, I didn't even think about that. What are you doing? You're taking and you're recalling this person's memory back to a need and a want that they expressed with you, and you're matching it to a presentation point, right? Now, you might even take it one step further and ask, do you feel like this backyard would be adequate, good enough, or would it be spectacular? Or, Jim, on a scale from 1 to 10, if we look at this backyard, give it a number for me. How does it compare with the backyard with the home you grew up in, right? If you're able to do this conversationally and you're kind of bouncing between needs and wants, recalling past Q&A that you've had and tying it to benefit and future and go forward, my gosh, at that point, you're a professional salesperson. It's important that you have a certain amount of influence over your customers' thinking, not because you want mind control, but you have to be able to help guide them through a process. They have so many things going on in their minds that it's important for you as a professional to be able to kind of help them sort that stuff out. And just let them talk. Let them be honest. No, you know what? I don't think this backyard's going to work. I think it's horrible. I appreciate you telling me that. And so I don't want to keep showing you horrible backyards. So would you mind if we took a moment, right? Ask for permission. Would you mind if we just took a moment, took a pause, maybe just walk through what is it about this yard that's just not going to work for you? You might find that it's not the backyard at all. You might find that it's the color of the house. There might be any number of things that are being pulled into this person's psychological staging that you're not aware of. It's important to make sure your presentations are spot on with needs and wants and core motivations. Take the time to identify those things by asking great questions, follow-up questions, and do it weaving in and out of your presentation. Congratulations, you made it through yet another chapter. So the homework at this point should be self-evident, but let's just walk through it a little bit. Last chapter, we really dialed in on the whole buyer dialogue and the buyer discussion, the buyer interrogation. This chapter was all about sellers, handling objections, dispute resolution, and positioning ourselves for presentation. So we have basically 4 areas where we need to start crafting out great interrogation and dialogue around these scenarios. I want you to take as much time as necessary to start walking through and gaming it in your head and writing it down. Think about the last time you talked to a seller. Think about the last time you talked to a buyer. Think about the last time you were in the midst of some kind of dispute resolution or handling an objection. Think about the times that you've tried to have a great presentation and it just fell flat. I want you to do this deep cleaning and start walking through. I want you to write it down. I want you to write down these questions. The point at which you're in this past experience in your head and there was a failure, or it didn't seem comfortable, or gosh, you know what, at that point, I probably should have said ... This happens all the time because we get into these situations and these little scenarios, these little vignettes at work, and we're talking to buyers and sellers and other people. And later on that evening, we start replaying it in our head, and we're like, man, I should have said this, I should have said that. I'm just letting you know that 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10, the reason you didn't come up with the right thing to say at the right moment was because before you can say that thing, there has to be a question to create some clarity, some context, and a little bit of a platform to stand on before you launch off into saying the thing that you have to say. Which means right now, I want you to take the time to start thinking and crafting out, what do these questions look like? What are these scenarios that I have in my real estate career that I'm struggling with? Now, the good news is you're not alone. For goodness sakes, if you're stumbling with any part of this series, and particularly this homework assignment, where it's about gaming different dialogue in your head so that you can start becoming really accustomed and comfortable with your own words, if you're struggling with that, for goodness sakes, reach out to me. Get on my calendar. Give me a phone call. I'd love to be able to walk you through some of the best ways for you to get this homework assignment done. Not just so that you can say you did it and you get the certificate, for the class, but I want to make sure that you're asking great questions and you're formulating strategies around asking these questions with everything that we've covered up to this time.